In tonight's warm-up, I really want to break down very simply the dynamics of how we would approach what we call anxiety from a spiritual workout perspective. Now, again, I'm not talking about anxiety that we are under psychiatric care for, seeing a psychiatrist, on medication at that level. What I am talking about might very well incorporate people who take medication for anxiety, which is fine. And I'm going to just talk in terms of the experience one might have, let's just say waking up in the middle of the night in a fit, just, go from being asleep to shooting up awake, and just sort of address this fairly common way that people experience anxiety and how might we go about it from a spiritual workout perspective. So there you are. It's whatever time, let's just say in the early morning, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, you've been asleep, you shoot up, you're awake, and this is familiar to you. You, quote unquote, have anxiety. This has happened before. Maybe it's been happening regularly. Maybe it hasn't happened for quite some time. Maybe it's happening for the first time. So I don't want to focus too much on the circumstances, but rather on what do we do about it. So in that moment, there are really, I think, two places that we can start. The first place that I would recommend is beliefs matter. So here I am, I've been sleeping, I wake up, maybe my heart is pounding, maybe I'm sweating. The question that I would suggest we ask in this moment is, what am I thinking? What am I believing? What am I thinking? What am I believing? So what might an example of that be? Oh my God, the sky is falling. This situation is unbearable. I don't know what to do. You guys probably have lots of other ideas that come to mind, but regardless of what they are, if we can isolate the thoughts that we're having in that moment, that's a fantastic place to go. But let's say it's just too much and it's just all emotion, it's all feeling. The body's on fire, the heart is palpitating, and don't ask me what the hell I'm thinking about right now. I'm just freaking out. So if that's where one is, if that's where you are in this dynamic, this is where tapping is going to come in handy. Now, tapping is not one of the 15 concepts that we work with, but it is a very handy tool that we use in so many different ways. So if that's the situation and there's just so much, let's just call it overwhelm, and can't even really get to what I'm thinking, that's an opportunity to just start tapping right then and there. All this anxiety, let it go, let it go, let it go. You can go about it that way, just to get your system to calm down. So if you can't start with what it is you're believing, do some tapping, and that should calm your system down enough to then go back and say, okay, what's going on? What am I believing? What am I thinking? What am I believing? What am I thinking? So let's say you find one of those beliefs. I will never get out of this situation. All right, there's an opportunity to start tapping. Beliefs matter because they create experience. I will never get out of this situation is a very anxiety producing thought to have. And until we address the thought, not much is going to change. So here's a perfect time and example, sitting right there in bed. Even though I have this belief that this situation is never going to change, I love and accept myself completely, et cetera, et cetera. Now we might be able to dial down that belief, and then what's the next one? And what's the next one? And what's the next one? Just sit there as long as it takes to go through every single individual thought, every single individual belief. That is your best shot at longer term eliminating anxiety, or at least anxiety related to what's going on in that particular moment. Again, in spiritual workout world, we're not here to learn how to manage our anxiety. We're here to learn that anxiety is just a thought. I can only be feeling this way because of what I'm believing about myself, what I'm believing about life, what I'm believing about what's possible, what I'm believing about this circumstance. And so we go right to it, pulling up that belief, if you will, from the root. Now, we're not done yet, because if we're waking up in the middle of the night with this level of anxiety, or maybe we're just sitting down in our house during the day and it happens, or maybe we're out driving somewhere and it happens. If we're dealing with that level of anxiety, then the belief that's causing it in the moment is half of the story. So once we've done some tapping, or whatever means we employ to address the belief and address the physical body by allowing it to just resettle itself into homeostasis, if you will, well, then we want to be sure that we're not setting ourselves up to recreate more and more and more and more and more and more anxiety. So while we're still sitting there, we've calmed our system down a little bit. We've identified some specific beliefs that we're having about the situation. We're calmer. So now what do? We go directly to our intention, or intentions that we have, whereby this circumstance, this situation doesn't happen, right? So maybe the anxiety is specific to something and you already have an existing intention into which you can then move and then tap yourself into alignment with it, such that you start waking up with a out of the blue, freaking out, sweating, doing what you have to do, all the way down to aligning with an intention for what you'd rather be, what you'd rather do, what you'd rather have. Maybe the intention, again, is specific to the circumstance. Maybe it's a little bit more general, like, I just live peacefully. I'm a calm person. I always know what to do when it's time to do it. The rationale for all this is really quite simple, because even if it's the middle of the night and you've been sound asleep and it sounds like, well, maybe this is a lot to do, it's really not a lot to do. You want to do all of what we're just said. It doesn't have to necessarily take a long period of time, especially if it's not your first rodeo and you've been doing this before. But either which way, the worst thing would be to try to force yourself back to sleep, to leave all of this energy that's gotten kicked up unresolved, because everything is energy. It doesn't get created or destroyed. If that energy is not allowed to, again, resolve itself, then it's just going to add to your anxiety in general. And it's going to make the next day that much more difficult, and it's going to leave you that much more vulnerable to one little thing happening, and then here it's all getting reconstituted, whereby when we go along the simple spiritual workout path that I'm talking about here, identifying what we're believing about what's going on, using tapping to address those beliefs and to address the physical response in the body, bring the palpitations down, and then moving into the intention of what's preferred. Well, that's just a whole lot more productive, isn't it? And whether you have to do that one time or 10 times or 100 times, there will be the last time that you have to do that. There will be the day further down the road where you notice, wow, it's been quite some time since I've had anxiety like that. This is addressing it at its root. Now, the last thing I want to say, still in the realm of beliefs matter, is what am I believing overall about this thing called anxiety? In other words, do I believe, well, this guy's talking and talking, but he doesn't know what he's talking about? Anxiety is anxiety. I always have had it. I'm always going to have it. There's a belief right there. Anxiety is just part of life. There's a belief right there. I will always, my mother's anxious, I'm anxious, and I will always be anxious, right? So there's the beliefs, there are the beliefs we have and the thoughts and ideas we have about what's happening, right? That lead to waking up in a sweat. And then there are the beliefs we have about the fact that we are in that place to begin with, that we experience this thing called anxiety. So the person who has strong beliefs about, let's just say, a commitment to anxiety, this is the way it is, it's the way things are, I've tried a million things, I just want to try to manage it. That person is not going to have a whole lot of long-term benefit from what I just outlined, because their overarching belief is none of this makes a difference anyway. Maybe it'll calm them down in the moment, especially if they do the tapping, right? But again, it's the overarching belief about what does it mean to me, or what are my own beliefs about this thing called anxiety. So I hope that's of use and value to you or anybody you know who might struggle with this particular dynamic. Let's take a nice deep breath together. Hold on to all the juicy parts. Let go of the other parts, and we'll just come back and